Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. This video is going to be about how criminals can justify their offending behaviour. Before we start, I just want to remind you that there are a number of videos on aspects of criminal psychology and psychological analysis of offenders. If you enjoy this video, please like it, as it helps this channel continue to produce free content. I also have a range of online courses available where you can learn about offender profiling, serial killers, detecting deception, and so on. The details to my website where you can find all that is in the video description. All of my online courses come with full support and a certificate of completion. Some of them are free and they all come with a money back guarantee if you do pay for them. Okay, just imagine yourself sat on a park bench. You have no money. You're feeling pretty sorry for yourself. Then a man walks past and he's got a gold watch on, he's got gold rings on, he's talking on his expensive phone about who needs to be sacked in the office. His suit looks very expensive. You can see a bulge in his back pocket, that's most likely a wallet full of money. If you assault that man and take his money, how will you feel? Would you feel guilty or would you feel pleased with yourself because you needed the money more than him? There are many types of criminals and their motivations will vary greatly. But do they feel guilt when they're carrying out their crimes or after they've carried out their crimes? If they do, how do they cope with that guilt? If they don't feel guilty, why not? Offenders will often give explanations for why they've committed their crime or crimes. They might even use these justifications in court. But do criminals justify their actions before they carry out the crime or after it? It could be either, depending on the circumstances. For example, somebody might have pre-planned their crime and that might have involved working with other people as well, other offenders. Throughout that planning phase, they might form thoughts such as, it's a big organisation and they won't miss the money, or they deserve a beating because of what they did to my family member, whoever. Of course, these justifications will often be formed after the crime has taken place as well to mitigate any feelings of guilt. Another example might be a man walks in on his wife to find that she's having an affair and beats both of them. Within criminology and psychology, the most commonly cited theory of how offenders justify their actions is neutralization theory. Although every crime and criminal are different and they might give a range of excuses or justifications, they all tend to use a very consistent and noticeable number of rationalizations to account for what they did after the crime. Sykes and Matzer propose that all behaviour, whether it's social or deviant, is learned by the process of social interactions. And that proposal was based on Sutherland's theory of differential association. Sutherland asserts that all criminal and deviant behaviour requires an individual to learn techniques of committing crimes, as well as the motives, drives, rationalisations and favourable attitudes towards breaking the law. Sykes and Matzer use that principle to develop neutralization theory. These techniques reduce the social controls over the individuals. Neutralization theory suggests that all offending behaviour is justified by the individual, and that might be either before or after the crime has taken place. These justifications or rationalisations are generally given in defence in court and are believed 100% by the individual. And that protects that individual from self-blame, the blame of others, or feelings of guilt. The first of these neutralization techniques is denial of responsibility. That technique allows offenders to use external factors to explain their behaviour. For example, having unloving parents or any other factors that are beyond the control of the individual. When an offender employs that technique of neutralization, they believe that they're being helplessly propelled into the situation and they view themselves as being more acted on than acting out. A good example of that would be when an offender told me it was triggered when my father didn't turn up to that meeting and I went into an episode of downloading major amounts of images, and that was child pornography images. The second of the neutralization techniques is denial of injury. That technique allows the individual to feel that nobody was hurt or harmed during the offence. An example of that would be something like shoplifting, because it doesn't cause any physical harm. A working example of this would be when an offender told me, With the fraud, I was robbing big catalogue companies, thinking that they won't miss their money. The third technique of neutralization is denial of the victim. In this technique, the individual might still acknowledge that an offence has occurred and that a person may have actually been hurt or harmed during it. However, they believe that the injury isn't wrong in the light of the circumstances. In that technique, the injury inflicted is seen as a justified form of retaliation or punishment. Sykes and Matzer suggest that the victim sees himself as the avenger and the victim is the wrongdoer. So, for example, attacks on homosexuals because of their sexual orientation. A good example of that would be when an offender told me that they walked into this house and was having a drink and my victim was slagging off my mate's girlfriend. I thought, yeah, that's not right. The lad whose girlfriend it was there, and I said, you better say something to him. He didn't, and so I got up and just started laying into him while he was on the chair. The fourth technique of neutralization is condemnation of the condemners. In this technique, the offender shifts the focus of the attention away from their own behaviours to those who disapprove. For example, Sykes and Matzer suggest that individuals might believe that the police are corrupt, stupid, or they're brutal, or teachers always show favouritism and parents always take it out on their children when they employ that technique. In adopting that viewpoint, the wrongfulness of the offender's behaviour is more easily disguised or lost to that offender. Again, another example of this would be an offender saying, I minimised, rationalised and justified my wrongdoing to everyone, including myself. My justifications involved blaming corrupt politicians, police and society. The fifth and final neutralisation techniques is appeal to the higher loyalties. Throughout this technique, individuals are able to neutralise social controls by sacrificing the demands of the larger society for the demands of the smaller social group to which that offender belongs to. While an offender might recognise the norms and laws of a society, other norms and laws are seen as being more important to them. A good example of this would be somebody who says, I just thought I've got to get the money. I was trying to justify the means I used to make money, so I kept telling myself that I was doing a good thing and I was being successful, and I repeated it so many times that I actually believed it. As with all theories within psychology and criminology, there are going to be exceptions to the rule. Some offenders' justifications might be classified under 2 or more techniques of neutralisation. Other criminal justifications might not fit into any of those categories. For example, where would the so-called white-collar criminals sit within these justifications? They're often motivated by greed. They often want to be seen to have what their peers have. You could argue that that would come under denial of injury because they often don't deal with the person that they're stealing from face to face. But sometimes they do. They could work in a bank, for example, and have to deal with investors face to face. Sex crimes often have multiple justifications, which are quite complex. So the example that I mentioned earlier of the man who was downloading indecent images was sparked only by his father not turning up to one meeting. In conclusion then, there can be many different and complex justifications for criminal behaviour. The majority of these can be classed under these 5 neutralisation techniques to minimise their feelings of guilt. However, these might not cover the full complex scope of ways to alleviate guilt for the offender. I do hope that you enjoyed that video and that you learned something new from it then. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.